Welcome, dear listener, to another episode of the Guitar Nerds podcast. I am your host, Joe Brandt, and joined this week by Matt Knight.
Hello, Mr. Joe.
Hello, Mr. Knight, and hello, dear listener. Welcome aboard.
The Guitar Nerds ship.
Yes, the Guitar Nerds ship. It's been a week, Matt. It's been a week since we've launched the Vintage Guitars Pro Shop listener-designed guitar giveaway. An entire week. So we've had lots of suggestions. We're going to talk about some of those a bit later, dear listener, but we've got 3 weeks left for that guitar. It is a good guitar. I was thinking again, like today, how well that guitar has actually turned out.
I know.
Considering how bad it could have been.
Well, you know, I don't think Vintage would necessarily mind probably us saying, maybe me saying, that, you know, for the longest time, never really entered the sort of zone of our guitar talking realm, because to be honest, the perception of Vintage for the very longest time, when there was a lot more guitar shops and perhaps a little less online business, was they're the cheap brand that every other store stocks because they can't get a Fender dealerships. You know, so for me, I was sort of always like, yeah. And then I saw this and I've seen the pictures and I'm like, the picture that you've taken on the Instagram that's up there, if it wasn't for perhaps the Wilkinson logo, maybe on the P90, you could have probably passed that off as a custom shop. From that picture.
It's really good. The build quality is excellent. I'm very, very impressed with it. And of course, you don't have to have Wilkinson pickups on them when you get them spec'd up. They'll do any pickups. We just decided to have Wilkinson because, you know, to be honest, partially because they were giving us this guitar for free. I didn't want to then be like, and I want £300 pickups, please.
Yeah. Well, that's always the thing. But I think, like we said last week, man, what a great guitar for the money.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, there's...
maybe I should spec one out. Maybe we should spec some more out. Maybe we should just make some more.
I keep specking out options and stuff that, you know, I really should get. I mean, they've got some great things that are ready built on their website, ready to be sold. But I do keep thinking about getting one. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
There's definitely some rogue choices. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, they can't all be as cool as this one. The P bass with the full body scratch plate is not necessarily something I would run to the store to get, but
in the pictures that one does look a little bit kooky. But I saw some photos of Johnny Dibble, Instagram bass player Johnny Dibble, at the Bristol Guitar Show this weekend just gone, playing that very bass, and in person it actually looked cool. And same as you, that's been up there for ages, and I'm sure it stays up there for ages because that picture doesn't really look like it does it many favors. But when I saw Johnny playing it, I was like, actually, this is pretty banging, and it's a great price on their website as well. I think it's like $799 or something.
Yeah. No, I just look at that and go, why are we giving that away again? Like, we should probably. Should probably keep that. But again, just goes to show how good a guitar you can get for that sort of money. It's the new must-be price point, I think, for most people.
Like the sort of £1,000 mark.
Yeah, you just gotta be in that ballpark, man.
Absolutely. And you know, look at the brands that operate in that area that are just killing it, like Reverend, you know, Charvel. You know, these companies like that are just.
Well, I mean, it's funny. You think about how many guitars we talk about that are over $2,000. And you're just like, we always just go, yeah, great, but just they feel so much more out of reach now. You know, we talked a lot about, I think, Epiphone last week, didn't we? And I was reading, I think, Guitarist Magazine's review on the Epiphone Firebird 1. I'm like, man, like, you know, that's £1,300-1,400 quid. And you're just like, would have never ever dreamed of spending $2,500-3,000, if not more, on a guitar like that from Gibson. But Epiphone, I'm like, I could give that a go. Definitely give that a go.
Yeah, it is very cool. Now, dear listener, this episode is called the Grez Bass VI a perfect instrument. I know that's a bit of a sensationalist title. I really, I shouldn't have done it. I should have just called it a Grez Bass 6. But we are going to talk about the Grez Bass 6. If you haven't seen, dear listener, I posted on Instagram a demo of me, an unboxing basically of the Bass 6 arriving. It's on Instagram. I put it on the Guitar Nerds group on Facebook as well. It's absolutely sublime. So we're going to talk a bit about the Grez Bass 6 as well. But we also, on this episode, want to take a look at some of your entries for the vintage competition, see what sort of names are there. And also, dear listener, you get to get an idea for what sort of names Matt and I like, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be choosing our favourites. So we'll be talking a bit about those. And then we're gonna be talking a bit about Matt's new crazy pedal board and his recent Eventide H90 acquisition as well. So yeah, that is this week's episode, the 14th
Lovely
episode.
stuff. Are we going to start with? Are we going to start with it then, Joe? We're going to start with the big one.
I was going to start with it. Yeah, why not? Let's do the Bass 6, then we'll come back onto the competition afterwards. How about that? Should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so dear listener, the Grez Bass 6, it arrived. It's incredibly cool. So first of all, Grez recently released a Mendocino Bass 6. So the Mendocino has existed as a single cut, a double cut, a baritone. They also released it as a short scale bass and as a 34-inch scale bass as well, all with that great, gorgeous Mendocino body shape. They have now completed all the instrument types by introducing a Bass 6, but it's a really interesting, unique take on a Bass 6, because often when companies make a Bass 6, they just go after that Fender 6 look. So even if it's not an offset, it will almost certainly have 3 single coil pickups and often those individual pickup selectors, which is not what you get on the Mendocino 6. Stock, the Mendocino 6 does come with 2 pickups. I don't know what they are. Gemini Dynasonic pickups. So you get 2 of those. But what makes it really versatile and unique is they have a multi-tone tone pot, which is a single center. It's got a little notch in the middle. When it's sat in the middle, it's a flat response to your tone. Whereas it's a low cut when it's rolled forward and a high cut when it's rolled back. And it's broad. It's a really broad boost. So basically, you leave it in the middle when you're playing it like a bass. You roll it forward when you want to play it like a guitar.
Okay.
And you can roll it back and the high cut actually into an amp. And I was playing it with a Plug-in Alliance Ampeg B15 amp sim. When you roll it back for that high cut, it sounds like an organ because it's so high cut and so much sort of swelling low end. It was such an interesting and unique sound. And of course, dear listener, there'll be a sound sample on this week's podcast. You'll really get to hear that there. So really unique range of sounds. Now, the one that we had spec'd up, Joe, grab here if you're a viewer. If you're a viewer, yes. So this was the one that we got spec'd up. We just had a single. Matt and I spec'd this up last year. Just a single Charlie Christian in the neck position, and that's it.
It's also double cut, which Mendocinos are normally single cut.
The basses have all been double cut,
right?
This follows that suit.
I can't remember if he actually had a Bass 6 when we spec'd out a Bass 6 or whether we said they need to do a Bass 6 and then that was it
was that Barry from Grez Guitars was thinking about adding a Bass 6 and he wanted our opinion on what we'd do with a Bass 6. He then didn't do that for his standard model at all, which is totally fine. I mean, what we've got is quite niche and weird, but he did build it exactly as we had spec'd and then offered me a rather good price on it. So.
Yeah, I think it was one of those ones, if you're a new listener, or maybe older listeners remember, but yeah, I think we spec'd it out as a kind of like dream on an episode or a Patreon episode, and then they were like, oh, we'll build it anyway. And then it's just like, and then it's just, I think he was like, I'm going to sell it, and he was just like, I think I'm going to buy it.
Yeah, I had no choice, really.
It looks really cool because the body's kind of small, but the neck feels It looks quite long. I mean,
The
obviously
neck
it
does
is
look
long,
really long on it. Yeah, that full 30-inch scale. It's really great. I mean,
which
for
is
me,
what compared to a Squire Bass 6?
same.
Or like same. It's 38. Okay, yeah.
30 scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the same as a short scale regular bass.
Mm.
But for me, it's just such a brilliant, versatile instrument because it works really well for actually playing bass, finger style. And then just because of that tone pot and how lightweight it is, how accessible it is, it's also a great, great baritone guitar as well. I just think it's the best of everything for me. I'm actually currently recording a little EP with where I'm just using the bass 6 for everything except for drums.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's I've really loving this instrument. Really haven't put it down. Spent a lot of my evenings just sitting and playing the bass 6, and yeah, it's really quite something. I think
It's nice to see. It's nice to see something different in the bass 6 world. If you know what I mean. Like there's so many similar, I guess, like offsets and stuff like that that do the whole bass 6 thing. And I just think I'm really liking the sort of double cut vibes of this. I'm really liking the look of it from I don't know, that gloss black. It just looks like an absolute
gloss black with white
beast.
binding, and it's just that on the top, so you've got the exposed wood on the back and sides, dear listener, so it looks absolutely fantastic. And yeah, to be honest, being a hollow instrument really helps with the type of instrument it is. And the problem with the bass 6, also the Fender bass 6, is that 6-a-side headstock and the vibrato system with the strings all put, you've got a lot of sympathetic noises going on with a bass 6, which make it work fine, I guess, as baritone, but it's actually not great if you want to use it as a bass. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, whereas the Grez is just simple, thick sounding, dead sounding. Being strung with the labella flats obviously helps. Just a really, really good instrument if you want something that does a bit of everything. A great studio tool. Let's listen to the track right off the bat. Worth noting, because this is going to come around into something Matt and I are going to talk about afterwards. You may have also noticed on Instagram or Facebook, dear listener, I did acquire an Eventide H90, which I actually got for you, Matt. You asked for one of these, so we picked one up.
Yes.
So I'm sending this on to you tomorrow. Every sound on this track is just the H90 and the Grez Bass 6, dear listener. Obviously, there's I'm not using it for that much. A little bit of like ambient soundscapey stuff. It's kind of what you expect an H90 to be used for, I guess. But I'm not, by any means showing the full breadth of what an H90 can do. But anyway, here is the track. A little forewarning, this is a long one. This is actually one of the whole tracks that I was recording. So this is about a 2-minute track, so sit back and enjoy. go. The Grez Bass VI.
There we go. Joe, I can clearly tell you enjoyed it. One, because obviously it was the longest track I think we've had, but obviously, clearly, putting a lot of extra overdubs and layers into that because you're enjoying it so much.
Well, it's just so good. It's just so versatile. I mean, I understand that in other ways a Bass 6 is absolutely not versatile. There's plenty of stuff it can't do, but for the kind of palette of tones I wanted to make,
you can't bend a string.
No, you can't bend a string. But for being able to do guitar and bass, get some weird organy sounds in there as well, it's just a really great tool.
Cool for double tracking. Obviously as well and stuff like that, or even like getting some baritone vibes. If you put a capo on it, you get some baritone vibes out of it. I like the idea of the tone control. For sure. I think that makes a big difference.
I think the tone control was much more versatile than the Fender 6 is, even by having 3 pickups and the individual sort of on-off switches, that you could just do so much more. I find with the Bass 6, what you actually do is find a sound that sounds good. That's all you can do. Whereas, you found a sound that's good based on the application you're using it for. Whereas with the Grez, I felt like I could use all of these sounds all of the time, and it was very good.
Yeah. It's got me thinking maybe I should modify my Squire to just have one pickup in the neck.
Yeah,
it's the way to go. I'm sure I saw a news story today or an Instagram post this week of Fender had built a custom Strat for someone that just had one neck humbucker. I was like,
great. That sounds
bring
like
in the one neck humbucker. That's what we want.
I think I'm coming around to this just a neck pickup thing. That's maybe what I want moving forward. But it really was quite a remarkable guitar. Oh, that reminds me. On your Bass 6, if you do want to modify your Squire, they're not swimming pool root, by the way.
I know, that's the only annoying thing, isn't it? It's just like
you'd have thought they would be, but
it's the one thing I did get ages ago, which I haven't actually done yet, is the replacement pickup selector guard. So you could put a switch tip in there.
Ah, yes,
a 5-way switch rather than have the 3 on-offs and the bass.
Yes, it's definitely quite clunky. I love the look of the switches. It's so cool and retro. But when it comes to actual functionality, it is a bit of a pain.
You kind of just set and forget. And again, I think the Squire ones are great, but you'll definitely get a better range of tones if you upgrade the parts.
Yeah. 100%.
The pots are quite small. They're quite weak. They don't really give you a lot of depth and range, apart from obviously the volume. But then again, even the volume's not that linear. It's sort of a little bit more on-off. I've certainly always had mine just sort of set and forget, really.
Yeah, definitely.
So it sounds good. I think
another great mod you can make to the Squire Bass 6, which I think makes a lot of difference, is turning it into a hardtail. There are a couple of companies that make hardtail solutions.
Yeah. Well, that's what I have done.
Oh,
that's what I've done with mine. Yeah, I put mine.
We've almost definitely spoken about that. In fact, we have. I'm vaguely remembering now. I just totally forgot that you'd done that.
Yeah, no, I put that. It's a company, I can't remember the name now, but they made the hardtail conversion.
Is it Descendant?
No, it's not Descendant. It's another company.
Right.
It's another company that I think they're based in the US.
Yeah, but they like with an H. but it doesn't matter.
They make a machine all of these parts.
Yeah,
but they never seem to have them in stock because they actually make a full anodized metal plate, like scratch plate, and I'm like, I sort of want that as well, but never seems to be in stock.
Guitar Nerds is sponsored by iZotope and Native Instruments, two companies who provide the bulk of the recording and editing tools used by Guitar Nerds. If you have a home studio or if you're thinking about getting into demo recording from home, then iZotope and Native Instruments provide the tools that you need to make premium quality recordings with ease and with virtually no equipment other than your guitar and laptop. iZotope make all the voice editing and audio repair tools that I use for the podcast each week, and Native Instruments guitar rigs Eventide 7 is one of the best, most comprehensive collections of virtual effects and guitar amplifiers available anywhere. Use discount code NERDS10 on any product in the iZotope and Native Instruments catalogue for 10% off their fantastic range of tools.
But it's very cool, Joe. I think I'm glad that we got to spec it. They also made it, and then you got to buy it. That definitely makes
a great idea, really. Guitar companies, if you're listening, take note. Ask us to spec something on the podcast. We'll inevitably make it in a way that we love, and then when you offer it to us, I will inevitably buy it.
Or there'll be another Guitar Nerds listener who will buy it in our place.
Exactly.
People want what we spec, Joe.
Sure, yeah. I don't know about that, but yeah. I want what I spec.
I guess that sort of leads us a little bit onto the Pro Shop, really.
Well, I want to talk about this first. I want to talk about the Eventide H90. I know that segue would have been nice, Matty, but I do want to talk about this, the H90. So I will admit to having needed a little bit of coaxing with the H90. As you know, I've mentioned on the podcast before, the H9 was fantastic. I didn't see what the H90 necessarily offered other than additional foot switches extra on top of all of that. And there it is for people watching. Really gorgeous, cool looking pedal.
It is a cool looking pedal.
And I guess I felt like the H9 actually happened a long time, like a decade ago, and I felt that with things like the HX Stomp being a £500 solution, which offers, if anything, more options because you've got amp and cab models, and with other companies, and even like you mentioned Mercury, the Mercury X from Meris, and the LVX as well, and things like the 500 series and 200 series from Boss. There are lots of other solutions out there that do a similar thing, not necessarily with the price tag that comes with an H90.
Expensive new. Expensive new. Can't deny.
No, yes. We did get a good deal on this secondhand, actually. You found that. But having sat down and messed around with it, I was like, here's the thing. If you buy an H90, you probably don't need to buy anything else ever. It's very good. And it's so at the top of its game. I'm like, all these other things that you might buy, like, I'll get a new sort of Thangli delay or reverb or pitch thing. The fact that this probably won't ever be topped. This is such a brilliant, versatile piece of equipment. Why not get this? Spend the money once, and then you never need another, delay, reverb, or pitch thing.
It was tricky for me because I started thinking. So to take a step back, I've got my big stereo pedal board, and I won't go through the whole setup. But one of the loops it goes into the SD 3000. So that's doing a kind of big, kind of classic vintage digital delay, which I've got set to just a couple of presets. And then I've got the microcosm. Now, the microcosm is awesome, but you have to use it so much to know how to harness it, but the results vary every time that you play it. It's almost like living and breathing, and you might come up with this cool riff and you might play it, and then you dial in that preset, then you don't play it the same way the next time and it sounds different. And I do love it, and maybe I'm not harnessing it in the right way, but I felt that it was also limited, that everything it did was very spacey and very kind of ambient.
Right.
And for the longest time, up until sort of Christmas last year, I had an H9 core on my board, which
I thought you had the Max.
I had no. So a friend owned an H9 Max and then shared his license out to about 3 other people because you could register up to 5 H9s on your account, and that was fine. And I used it for years. But what was starting to frustrate me more and more when I was sort of balancing between that and the microcosm was, if you want to edit the H9, you had to use the app.
Right.
So I was like, sometimes I'd sit down at my pedal board and I just want to like dial some sounds in and find something new and switch through something. And all you could really do was scroll through presets and then just go, that's a cool preset. But then if I want a deep dive, I've got to go into this thing. So ultimately, HX1 came out, and I was like, well, that's got all the legacy Line 6 stuff in it, which I really love, and it's like a tenth of the cost. I guess not that quite extreme. It's like 250 quid. And I've been using that, and it's been great. But then I kept coming back to the H90 for a couple of reasons. One, love the H9. So this is like a newer version of that, but you've effectively got 2 in there. So on the back, you've actually got 4 ins, 4 outs.
A really surprising setup.
So,
I was almost confused.
Yeah, so I spent a bit of time sort of deep diving into this, and you can run it in 2 ways. You can run it in series, which basically runs one stereo H9 into another H9. And then you can, if you're not running it in stereo, you've actually got a mono or 2 mono or 1 stereo sets of inserts. So talking about it being your pedal board, Joe, you could have this, you could run in your guitar out into one pedal, back into another H90, and then out into another pedal, for example. And then you could route those inside the H90.
Yeah,
so you could have a couple of drives. You could put those anywhere you want per preset. But what was interesting to me was that you could run it in dual mode, which basically separated the 2. So if you're using a loop switcher, you've got one. You could place a mono H9 at the front and a stereo H9 at the end. And then per preset, you could decide, actually, I want both algorithms to just be in stereo on one side, or I want to split them into 2. So I can have 2 separate algorithms running at the same time. So that was, for me, it was the flexibility of being able to sort of run that in a couple of different ways. Plus, you can do everything from the front panel.
Yes, that is a nice touch.
Which makes a big difference, a really big difference. I think because this actually doesn't have Bluetooth at all. If you want to edit it, you have to use the app, the desktop editor, if you want to.
Oh, I see.
Which I sort of get, because people buying it for a studio tool, would probably have it on a desk and then run it into your computer, and then you would, edit it from there. Plus the onboard flexibility of the foot switches, which I don't know if you messed around with that, Joe, but you can run it in like a up-down preset mode, but you can also run it in a performance mode, which then gives you master bypass and then a bypass for each effect, which is quite good thing. Or it can be 3 programmable switches that could do anything you want, like change the mix, or it could pitch shift the octave. And I think the one thing, as good as the HX1 is, and it's got some great things, it's got their poly pitch on there, or their poly flex, and they sound really good. No one does it better than Eventide.
Right.
And actually, that was the one thing I missed, that Eventide sort of sound. And listening and comparing some of the polyphonic sounds, I'm like, man, the Eventide's just got that extra edge. Plus, I think the upgraded engine made a big difference to the sound.
Right.
And I started thinking a lot about pedals on your pedal board that do more than one thing. Like we talked about, the LVX isn't really just a delay pedal. It's sort of like a multi-effects, really.
Yeah.
You got things like the microcosm or the chroma console, loads of these things that have got all these other modes in. And then I was thinking a lot about Chase Bliss, and I was listening to some of the sounds in here, and I'm like, you can get all those sounds. They've just added a brand new algorithm called Sticky Tape, which basically sounds just like the sort of the lossy and the generation loss from Chase Bliss. They've got some really good analog delay sounds in there. Their Polyflex gives you like all of the whammy stuff. They've got a couple of drives in there. I think Prism Shift is brand new, so you can have like 3 voices from a single chord, and then they're all pitch shifted and arpeggiated. So again, you get these kind of easier to harness extreme sounds. And I always find that the microcosm, it's like, twist a bunch of knobs and it makes a cool sound that you might use once. And I have definitely got another use for it, but this kind of started to tick a lot of the boxes.
Right.
And I had a friend who went out and gigged a whole tour with just an H90 and a Tonex. Because he was just like, I'll just run the Tonex in the effects loop of the H90, and then effectively I'll just, run my guitar in. Then you've got an H90 at the beginning, an H90 at an end, and your amp in the middle.
Whenever I think about the H9 and the H90, I just always think about it for just being there for sort of ambient sounds. But it has kind of everything in there, right? It's not as necessarily as comprehensive as some of the others that, like Helix, for example. But it does everything. Is that right? It does drives and fuzzes as well.
It does no amps. I guess that's the only thing it hasn't got in it. It's no amps. It's funny that you say ambient, because actually I think early on it was probably, they were more well known for things like their pitch shifting.
Yeah.
And things like their chorus and stuff like that. And they'd added more things into the H90 as time went on. But what's interesting now, which I don't know if you sort of went through this, but they actually have factory programs, presets, as does every unit, but they're organized into different playlists. And one of the playlists is soundscapes or ambient.
Wow.
So they've actually gone, well, loads of people are, because you've now got two H9s in one box, upgraded H9s, you can do some pretty crazy stuff with it, because the synth sounds in the H9 were really good as well.
Right.
And I did try one at the Stomp Box Deli and was sort of really impressed. So I think this is going to be a sort of a welcome addition, because you've got drives in there. I think Weed Whacker is new. That's their sort of tube screamer. Right. There's a couple of fuzzes in there. You've got all the things like tape echo, vibrato, pitch fuzz, all the classic delays, all the reverbs. I really like the reverbs. They've got a really nice, flexible set of reverbs. But the winner for me, I think, is really the pitch stuff. Right. And my biggest thing was like, I love some of the reverbs in H9, and I love the pitch stuff, but you could never have both at the same time unless you had two H9s. So this sort of takes away from that. And it was interesting because when we talked about it, Joe, you were like, I just buy an HX Stomp, but I don't know. I feel that HX Stomp certainly has its place, and I did consider something like that, because you don't have to use the amp modeling in it at all. And obviously you have got more of a signal path, but then I felt that, I don't know, wasn't quite hitting the right notes. Maybe that's just the snobbiness in me, Joe.
Maybe. So what is this going to replace on your pedal board?
So it's going to sit where the microcosm currently sits.
I see.
So I'm going to take the microcosm off, and put it on something else, which I'm working on. Maybe we'll talk about that later or in the Patreon. But and then I was like, the digital delay sounds are really good. They're really strong. I've been using the DD500 a lot, so maybe I'll take the SD3000 off the board and put the DD500 on there. But then I'm thinking, this probably does all of that anyway. So now I'm thinking I might actually free up a couple of spaces, but I don't have that many more loops left on the pedal board. So I'm like, I don't know what else to
and what are you going to control this via the ES8?
I think I'm going to control it via. I think I'm going to control it through the gig rig, which is what I'm using now, because that will select all the presets. Like I'll run it in two separate loops, so I can dial in one or the other, or if I'm going to use an algorithm that's going to use both on just one side. Because that's the great thing. I can have one sat at the front, one sat at the end. But if I wanted to use two reverbs, you can still dynamically move those two algorithms over to the latter side of the pedal, if you know what I mean.
Right, yeah.
So, I think it's going to replace quite a few things. But, I love my Grauter vibe pedal. But then you listen to like some of the vibe sounds in this, you're like, as you said, Joe, it sort of does everything.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of going, well, I haven't got my big pedal board out at the moment, so maybe I'll just spend some time with this and go, maybe I just don't need a big pedal board at all, Joe. Maybe I'll just replace everything with
With the
this.
Eventide H90.
Probably not. But there is certainly a lot to it. There's certainly a lot to it. A lot more than was on the H9. There are a lot of repeated algorithms that were on the H9, but they have upped the entire processor. So there's 11 or maybe 13.
Yeah, there were 50 odd on the original H9. I think there were 66 on the 90. Guitar Nerds is sponsored by Stringjoy Guitar Strings, the world's first true guitar string custom shop. The thing that I love most about Stringjoy is just their attention to detail, their dedication to making their strings the best in the world. And that's a labour-intensive task that they don't shy away from. Stringjoy are also innovative. They're always looking for new ways to make strings better. As guitar players, we've become so used to all the shortfalls of commercially available strings that we stopped even looking for them to be better, last longer, intonate well, easily. Stringjoy bring all of that to every pack of strings they make, and they're available almost as readily as any other generically made guitar string. Stringjoy strings are available at stringjoy.com and at 400 plus dealers across the globe. If your local store doesn't stock Stringjoy yet, ask them to.
Yeah, so I think some of the new ones, if I'm not mistaken, so you've got a Polyphony, Prism Shift, Even Vibe, Headspace, which is sort of like tape echo. You've got Bouquet Delay, which is a bucket brigade delay.
Yeah.
Polyflex, which I think allows you to do the polyphonic like pitch stuff. Aggravate, which is an octave fuzz, which is quite cool. That's brand new. I think that only came out the other day. Sticky Tape, which is also brand new. Polysynth. So you've got polyphonic synth, 3 independent synth voices. Again, similar to what you have got on the HX series, because you've got the, I can't remember what they call it now, Joe, the oscillator one that you can kind of dial
like
in
the
those
4-voice, whatever. Yeah.
Flanger phaser, SP reverb, and then Weed Whacker, which is their tube screamer, and then Wormhole, which is their new mega size hypermodulated reverb.
Wow.
So there's a lot of cool stuff. Definitely the Sticky Tape was interesting to me. And also the fact it has a really fully functional looper on there. And that's the one thing I don't have on my pedal board at the moment. And I'm sort of using the microcosm for that. But actually, the microcosm's a little bit limited in its looper functionality unless you use a MIDI controller. So I was sort of going, maybe this will just... I think this will replace the microcosm. I love the microcosm. But I think this does a little bit more, a bit easier to dial in, a little bit more visual.
Right.
Microcosm can be a little bit more hit and hope, I think, sometimes. And I've certainly been frustrated with it. I'm like, why doesn't it sound like what I want it to sound like? Or it does something once and it doesn't do it again. And that's why for a little while I was considering putting the Chase Bliss Mood back on the pedal board, because actually I felt the Mood is easier to dial in than microcosm.
Right. Which one's the Mood again? I get slightly
The Mood
confused.
is the one they did with Old Blood Noise.
Yes.
They now make the Mark II, which is the purple one, but the original one that I've got is the Mark I. That's the orangey one. And that's reverb, delay, and tape, and then you've got the sort of micro looper in there at the same time. So
very cool.
Very cool indeed. Because I know you got the Meris reverb recently.
Got both. Yeah, I got the LVX a while ago, but I got the Mercury X recently, and me and Blake did a bit of a deep dive a couple of weeks ago on a podcast episode. I really, really like the Mercury X. And for me, when I was using the H90, because the bulk of what I wanted were ambient sounds, part of me was going, these were easier to dial in on the Meris, but it's because the Meris is really all about, whilst it has an incredible recently released desktop editor, I'm not a big fan of that sort of stuff. I want to do it on the pedal. So they have a very good way of sort of menu diving, and you can even on the Meris stuff, you can even look at the effects in different ways. You can look at them in a list format or in more of a sort of a visual way with these like bubbles and that show you how each element relates to the other element, stuff like that. So it's very well designed, really good. I'm not sure too much out there is. I don't think there's anything better than those two. The LVX and the Mercury X just seem like they're just such incredible delays and reverbs. I slightly prefer the LVX because I feel like a lot of the things I do with the Mercury X, I can get something like that on the LVX, and then of course the LVX has all these incredible delay and pitch things, which is very cool. But both products are absolutely fantastic.
There's just so much in that sort of. There's just so much in that world now of like multifunctional pedals that aren't quite multi effects, but basically do everything that you need.
Yeah,
and then it does really. Yeah, you start to question how much you really need for a pedal board, or whether you really need a big pedal board. But I've sort of started now, so I might as well finish.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
but I'm looking forward to it. Send it quickly, Joe. Because
I will. I'm sending it tomorrow. I'm booking the collection after we podcast. It will
excellent
be with you in a couple of days.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
A great piece of kit. I'm also, to be honest, I did start looking at H9s after, because I was like, this is good. And H9, the price on them is in the toilet at the moment. So, and I don't necessarily need a max, but like, you can pick up a core for like 300 quid now.
Yeah, I can't remember how much I sold mine for. Sold it really quickly. I just put it up at the right price rather than one of those people that sticks everything on reverb too high, waiting for an offer. I'm like, no, just put it at the right price and let it sell. I sort of just sold it really quick because I had a core as well. The obvious customer is someone who already had an H9 Max.
Right.
Because even though the H9 is discontinued, you can still max out the core. And if you've got an H9 Max already and you buy another core, you can just literally put the two together. So it's nice and easy. So sold my H9. Never thought I'd necessarily go for the H90, but then sort of one came up and I was like, you know what? It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like, the H9, there's an H9 Max for $375 on Reverb at the moment.
Yeah, they are very good.
Less space on my pedal board as well.
Yeah, I think I would say definitely out of all the things that are out there, that for me is the one that I would recommend the most. However, if you want to go for a new one, an H90 new is like 900, just over 900 quid. That's
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. There's the only other pedal that I think is probably more expensive than that is the CXM78 Chase Bliss, which I also have on my pedal board. So I might as well just paint everything green with pictures of like Benjamin Franklin on or whatever, just some dollar bills.
Wow.
It's pretty bad. Can't take that one out, kicking. You just sort of get, you just sort of go.
You get the fear about beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And people just go, oh, it's just all about the money. And I went, yeah, well, when you don't play gigs. When you don't play gigs, that you can just buy all of the pedals.
That is it.
So that's the H90. Can't wait to get it.
Yeah, you'll get it soon. Now, dear listener, we did say we were going to have a little look at some of the name suggestions for the Vintage Pro Shop. Before we do, I thought I should give you guys a proper demo of it. I was messing around with it earlier. I just really, really enjoy playing this. Surprisingly thick sounding pickups, like really kind of grungy, thick sounding. But they're really great from both the P90 and the humbucker, and really different tones off of each. So it's very, very versatile. I did like I recorded this little demo. The chords, the rhythm section's being done on the bridge humbucker. The lead section's being done on the neck P90, and it's all going into a Tonex, which is doing like a Dumble style amp with just like a little bit of reverb on each. Let's give that a listen. Then we'll talk about it for a bit, and then we'll have a look at your names. There you go. Shorter than the last one.
Yes. Didn't enjoy it as much, Joe, or is it?
Oh, yeah. There you go. So that's the Vintage Pro Shop. Yeah, like I say, surprisingly thick sounding, and especially have the amp set any differently. Yeah, well, it's other than knowing that they're Wilkinson, I'm afraid not. Actually, I should really ask. I'll ask Paul at Vintage what went in, but yeah, surprisingly thick sounding is the only way I can describe them. For a Jazzmaster especially, I felt it sounded really Gibson-y, the instrument in general, but really great.
It's got that sort of grungy vibe to it, for sure, from what it sounded like. Still blown away by how much we do on plugins, and just that still sounds so good. You sort of never really question it, really. And I keep looking at the picture, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm in. So we're gonna pick some of our favorite names, are we?
Yeah,
are we, Joe?
Yeah. Should we have a look at some places? So let's check out Instagram first, shall we, Matt? Now the whole deal with this, dear listener, is you can name in order to enter. If you didn't hear what we were talking about last week, in order to enter the competition to win this guitar, you have to name the guitar. And Matt and I are going to basically choose our top 10, 20 names, put them in a hat, and we'll do a live stream where we'll pick a winner at random. So we have to like the name. And the whole thing, obviously, because I need it to be shared around lots of places, the whole thing for us is that more people see our stuff. That's what we get out of this. So I also ask people to tag a friend when they comment. But I really thought I was pretty clear, like with the instructions. There were a few people, only a couple, but one who must have entered 40 times with the same name, just tagging a different mate. And it's like, if I didn't like the name the first time, the 14th time's not going to get you in. I was so clear, like, we have to like the name. Don't just enter it 50 times.
Well, hopefully they'll work this one out now.
yeah, maybe. But I didn't like the name anyway, so it's not getting in.
The name was the Joe Branton Machine.
Yeah, but I said I stipulated that you can name it whatever you want in a sense. Like you could make it about vintage guitars, about guitar nerds, about yourself, about the guitar itself. And people are really locked into the fact that it's a green guitar. That seems to be the overarching thing that people are going for with the name. So we're getting lots of like Shrek, Green Meanie, Green Machine, Green Ronaldo, Forest Twang. Lots of stuff like that. Lots of Clover, Green Inferno, stuff like that. So Orc Army, Swamp Master, Very Verde.
I like Le Frog.
That's what you like.
Le Frog. Actually, a couple that I'd point. I'm just scrolling through it now. One of them is Satchmo, because it's an old vintage Jazzmaster. Satchmo being the nickname of jazz legend Louis Armstrong. Right. So I liked that, Satchmo vintage Jazzmaster. I thought, that's cool. Obviously, a lot of people have said Nerdcaster.
Yeah, we said that can't get in.
I like the idea of, for me, because I know you said maybe, Joe, give a few hints of things we pick. I like the idea of giving it a kind of Jodo guitar style name.
Oh, like
Perhaps
hidden
something
meaning. Yeah.
that perhaps would come with a bit of a story.
Yeah. A few
Something
people
like,
have done that.
yeah, I'm just sort of I'm just having a look through. Someone said, where is it? Someone had a name that was, I was like, oh yeah, that feels like there could be a story behind that, or it sounds like the player that would play it.
Right, that's cool.
And I kind of like that idea. Give it a kind of bit more of a name and a theme. Maybe explain some of that name in your
Yeah. Well,
kind of pitch.
Yeah, I like over on Facebook, I think Jake Gray had entered one called the Lotus 18, which was great because it was a reference to Sterling Moss's British Racing Green Lotus race car, which was kind of a nice touch. And I liked things like that, like Russ Stanziel. I don't know how to say your last name, Russ. He had a great one. He said, "I'd call it McQueen as the iconic American actor Steve McQueen personified. He's a 60s film star, aligning with the guitar's 60s vibe. He was in the movie Le Mans, which is about race cars, like this guitar's British Racing Green colour. And the guitar, like Steve McQueen, could not have a more hip, retro cool vibe. I liked things like that. That was pretty smart. Paul Corrigan had a good one. He suggested that it should be called Stephen Carlson, Nicholas Strom, Rocket Rob Patterson, Phil Sadler, Marcus Deluxe, Suresh. It's every single top tier Patreon name in one word, and you have to say it in one breath.
Brilliant. I personally, a lot of people, have given names that are related to the color.
Yeah,
but I kind of see this as like the model, and there might be lots of other colors. Not that saying that Vintage Pro Shop are actually going to do that, or Vintage are turning this into a model, but because it's got a little bit more, it's got, I don't know, it's screaming like Nick Reinhardt vibes to me. Do you know what I mean? I kind of think, it doesn't matter what the color is, like give it some sort of other name.
Yeah, I mean, one name that definitely has already made the list for me came from Sam Brooksby, and his suggestion was the Dear Listener, which I thought it was a great way of doing like the Nerdcaster. It's that, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it's nice to have one that's about the podcast and stuff as well. So that would definitely go in. But the rest of them I'd probably be more inclined to go for clever things about the guitar itself.
I like this one. I'm just going to fact check it first. Yeah, I like Tommy Oliver, because that was the name of the Green Power Ranger.
That's so good. That's very good.
Lots of reference to like Shrek or lizards. Lots of people just tagged friends. I'm like, unless you want your friend to be called the guitar. But it's so funny, isn't it? And you realise, and having been in this position myself in my job, like coming up with names for things is really hard.
Yeah.
Because all the good names,
what are you talking about?
Are taken.
All boss name stuff are letters and numbers.
Oh, when we like name amps in multi-effects or things like that, or even if you're trying to name things like plugins and stuff, it's just, I think for like Newell DSP, and I know like when I've talked to Rabia about his things, it's coming up with things that are relevant to you from things that aren't related to guitars that sound cool if they were a guitar thing. I think like Rabia's guitars are named after like Soulsborne game things, like items that you pick up or whatever. So, I think that's you have to sort of look further than the guitar world. But there's so many on here.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. There's been like 500 entries on Instagram, 100 or so on the Facebook group.
Right.
About that again on Facebook, and about another 100 on maybe it's a couple hundred on Facebook, and about 100 on the Patreon as well. In fact, the very first entry to this that happened on Patreon, because I put this up on Patreon before anywhere else. I can't remember who made it now, but it was the very first entry was Guitar Face.
Oh, that's a good job we're not going for the popular vote. That would have that would have got somewhere near the top, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, but we've still got what, three more weeks of entry. So who knows what might come out?
Yes, exactly. We will see. Now, dear listener, we are coming up to the end of this week's episode of Guitar Nerds. Matt and I are going to be heading over onto Patreon, patreon.com/Guitar Nerds. We're going to talk a bit about Matt's jazz odyssey over there. For anyone watching, this is the. Oh, it's so dark.
You're only going to see it if you're watching it. You're only going to see if you're a regular listener, if you go on YouTube and look at it. No, we'll talk about it on the Patreon, I think. We'll dive in. We'll dive in.
Yeah, we will. We're going to go talk about that over there. But before we go, I just want to thank all of our top tier Patreon backers. You too, dear listener, can become a Patreon supporter of Guitar Nerds over at patreon.com/Guitar Nerds. Thank you very much to Stefan Carlson, to Nicholas Strom, Rocket Rob Patterson, Phil Sadler, Marcus Deluxe, Suresh, Dorsonic Pickups, Rob Witherden, Anton Friant, Barry Gresbick, Steve Davis, John Conaway, Yogi the Guitarist, Ty Allen, Carl Harris, Sean Hughes, Andy Hoffler, Eric Hemmer, Jeffrey Wax, Dan Pilver, Brian Einsler, Dylan Griffiths, Mark Hizao Kadawaki, Eric File, Peter Pesce, Chris Franklin, Andy Manley, Joe Puttick, Blake Wyland, Phil Radomski, Dave Lee, Ross Edwards, Jason Wharton, James Dorr, Jake Gray, Derek Rich, Scott Kennedy, Steve Merkel, Abe Matthews, Christopher Losef, Stephen Bork, Robin Smith, Kaitopia the Band, Andy McKenzie, Brad Page, Rob Nordvik, Scott O'Brien, and, of course, Moog Gravit.
Mm-hmm.
There you go, dear listener. But yes, do join us. We're going to be talking about Matt's ridiculous pedal board over on Patreon, and we'll be back next week with more of this guitar nerdery. Farewell.
Goodbye.